this segues effectively into the next item, which is priorities for this coming year. Mr. Tom.
So we heard where we've been, and now we're going to talk a little bit about where we're going. And this is probably an appropriate time to talk a little bit about the role of the council, since it pretty much is going to dictate what we can do in the future. As we're transitioning now into implementation instead of planning, our role has changed. It's basically 5 primary items: coordination, integration among agencies, ensuring consistency with the Delta Plan, having science provide information that we can use to inform policy, providing comments, including comments on BDCP, and then providing accountability. Those are the main roles that we're engaged in. Now that can be broken out into a few other items which gain relevance when we talk about what actions are we going to do, what are we going to emphasize in 2014. Basically, the Delta Plan gave us the 14 policies and the 73 recommendations. We've decided to focus on about 25% of those for this year and make that our emphasis. If you ask what are key priorities among these 16-plus items that you see in the fold-out, it really boils down to 3 primary issues: the levy assessment program, getting the implementation committee up and running, and the importance of science through some of the flow studies and work we're doing there and getting the science action agenda in place. So if you pushed me into nailing what are the 3 things that are really the most important, those are the ones. But on a broader perspective, we have time and resources to get all of the items that we're showing on the fold-out that we can accomplish. Some of the work that we're talking about now is when we talk about our role, it's to coordinate and integrate. Now here again, we beat that one to death today, I think, on the implementation committee. We also have early consultation. We can hear appeals. We can do EIR reviews, provide comments on other documents. We can track the progress of other agencies, of ourselves through performance measures, and look at performance outcomes, which is something we're going to be developing in 2014. We can hold meetings and issue requests for papers from other agencies. So basically, it's a role that is facilitative, and the way I characterize it, it's to coordinate and integrate all of the actions in the Delta to get something done. Hank, I see you have a question. Go ahead.
More, I guess, partly a question and partly a comment. We talked earlier. Is there no scope in there for the council to drive, push, lead, encourage, enhance?
Well, yes, there is. And I think that's in our development of issue papers. I think the storage paper that Mr. Fiorini has done is a great example of taking the lead, setting the tone for an argument, and opening a dialogue. I think the levy prioritization is another great example of us taking some of this in hand and taking the lead on it to make something happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that these verbs are passive, but they don't appear as active as they should be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, coordinate is not the same as lead, drive, ensure, those things.
We'll have to have some discussion on that, but I don't think the law says you shall lead other agencies. I mean, they have their individual authorities. We can
not leading other agencies, but pushing ideas.
Yes, that we can lead
pushing
on.
Activities.
Yes, I would agree.
Setting priorities and then driving them.
And that can come through a combination of the tracking and reporting function. Are we really watching people doing what they're doing? The council's oversight role. Hey, let's get in here and tell us what you're doing, and let's hear how things are working. And then the use of the council as a bully pulpit and the communications tools that the council has.
I mean, one is reactive, waiting for other people to do it and then watching them do it, and the other is proactive.
Yeah. And I think
trying to cause people to do things.
And I think in the work that we've outlined for the coming year, we talk about details. We can show some examples where we're really emphasizing that secondary role.
The secondary role.
The second role.
Yeah. I'm
driving, pushing.
Okay, I would say that's a primary, but
I want to weigh in on that. I was intrigued when Mr. Nordhoff in the previous agenda item had asked the question of whether there is a usefulness in separating policies and recommendations, and suggesting that perhaps whether through regulatory authority or non-regulatory authority, the policies are not the most important. I'm not sure that distinction is necessarily the right distinction, but the fact is it allows a structuring of the priorities for the coming year more forcefully if you say these are things we take as our primary new activities for the year, forget how you describe it. I mean, I think he's onto something on finding a way to separate out ongoing work from work which requires a higher level of attention in the coming year. And I don't know what the categories are, but I liked it.
Yeah, I think with a policy, it does have the status of being law. A recommendation is a little bit weaker. And one would think that you would put more muscle and be able to put more muscle and cause more activity behind a policy than you could a recommendation.
Well,
Having said that, you have to take the one that's most topical.
Yeah, and the way it doesn't fit into the category, because I think Randy's paper on mid-size and smaller storage and accelerating review of that is probably one of the recommendations. It's really, we don't control the storage thing. That's something that where they're actually, a bunch of people are looking for ways to do things differently to see some action. That offers an opportunity. That's why I haven't bought off completely on the policy recommendation.
I didn't think you would.
But there are some of the recommendations that are really important and give rise to our need to get actively involved in promoting stuff. Randy.
It's an overgeneralization, but in a lot of cases our policies are designed to prevent further harm. Our recommendations are designed to achieve successes and benefits to the co-equal goals. So I would, depending on which policy you want to emphasize, it may not achieve the outcome that you would hope. So I'd just offer that as a general observation.
But I do think there are some clear areas where leadership really fits, and I think that's in our science community, where we are leading the idea of what adaptive management is, what's the delivery of a best available science, how are we going to synthesize all these reports, translate it into policy from the science. I mean, right now nobody else is doing that. We are the lead in that effort, and I think are making impressive strides right now in that area.
Just going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at next year, what would give you more satisfaction than anything else if you could complete an activity or at least really get it launched and moving quickly? Which area would that be?
Well, I mentioned the three already. I think getting the levy prioritization work done would be a big bonus. I mean, it's a huge item. It needs to be accomplished. We've been working on it for quite a while at this point. I want to see that done. I think the other things that...
I would certainly agree with that.
Yeah, and the other thing I think is to get the implementation committee up and functioning. I think right now that what we heard today is a lot of trepidation about a committee whose function is not clear to the public. And I think we need to get it up and running. And I think a lot of the anxiety is going to settle down when they see that the primary role is the integration of ongoing actions that other agencies are doing. It's basically the facilitation of accomplishment of those recommendations. That's the key thing that group is going to do. That'll be a big accomplishment if we can get that underway. And then I think the science implementation. You cannot underscore the importance of those flow studies with the State Water Resources Control Board and the role that our science program is taking in that. I think that's a huge item. Getting that underway and accomplished is going to be a big deal. Getting the science action agenda put together, again, a monumental undertaking, and I think it's one that's really going to move us forward.
How about you, Randy? Similar?
Yeah, I would add emergency preparedness and response, coordination and planning to that list. But I think Chris provides you with three very important aspects. And if we can accomplish those this next year, we'll get an A+ from our grading organization.
I wouldn't bet on that. Okay.
I'll settle for anything above a C at this point.
Any other questions? All right. I am told, by the way, that all the folks for item 14 are already here, and rather than have them wait through the performance measures and our staff discussion, I think we ought to advance to number 14, which is the BDCP report, if members do not mind. And so